I was sitting in the hotel lobby, absently stirring the coffee that had already gone cold, when I heard that laugh. 58 years on this earth had taught me that certain things simply can't be forgotten. And the sound of James Morrison's genuine joy was one of them. My heart stopped before my mind even processed what was happening. I turned slowly, as if a sudden movement could make the moment disappear, like smoke, and there he was. Grayer, certainly. Shoulders a bit more stooped, but those brown eyes that always seemed to hold some gentle secret remained exactly the same. He saw me at the same instant. I saw his smile freeze for a fraction of a second, saw his hands tighten around the strap of his leather briefcase, saw time roll backward across his face. Catherine. He formed my name with his lips, but no sound came out. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I just waved, a small, foolish gesture that didn't begin to do justice to the 35 years that had separated us. He crossed the lobby with that gait that had always been his, slightly awkward, as if his limbs were a bit too long for his body. When he stopped in front of me, we just looked at each other, two middle-aged people standing in the middle of a corporate hotel in Denver while the world went on spinning around us. "You still hate cold coffee," he said finally, pointing at my abandoned cup. I laughed, a strange sound coming from my tight throat. "You still remember that?" "I remember everything, Kat." And suddenly, we were sitting, I'm not sure how we got there, in a quieter corner of the lobby, with two fresh cups of coffee between us. He told me he still lived in Portland, that he worked as an architect specializing in historic building restoration, that he was there for the same sustainability conference that had brought me across the country, told them about Boston, about my non-profit focused on affordable housing, about how life had taken me down paths I never imagined. "When we studied together at the University of Michigan, you got married," he said, not as a question, but a statement, his eyes resting on the ring I still wore, even 3 years after burying Thomas. I did 28 years. He passed away from cancer in 2022. The words came easier than I expected. Thomas deserved to be remembered without pain, only with gratitude. "And you, divorced 8 years ago. No hard feelings. Melissa is a wonderful person. We just weren't. We weren't right for each other. Not in the way that matters." He paused, stirring his coffee. "We have 2 daughters, adults now. One's a veterinarian, the other teaches music to children." "You always said you wanted a house full of music," I said softly, and saw something flicker across his face, a shadow of recognition, of memory. We were silent for a moment, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that exists only between people who once knew the rhythm of each other's breathing. I watched him, this man who had been a boy with me, who had taught me to appreciate Coltrane, who had stayed up late with me in the library during finals, who kissed me for the first time beneath that giant elm on campus on a cold October night in 1987. "I still think about that autumn," James said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. "Our last year. When everything felt possible, before everything got complicated," I added. He nodded. "Your family needed you in Boston. Your father was sick, and you had the offer in Seattle, that dream architecture firm." I smiled, but there was melancholy in it. We were so young, James, too scared to ask the other to give up their dreams. So we didn't ask, we just let it happen. Let ourselves drift apart. His voice was low, filled with something that wasn't quite regret, but rather an acknowledgement of loss. I should have fought harder. Cat. Should have found a way. Felt. Tears threatened but held them back. We both should have. But we were too proud, too afraid. We thought love had to be easy, that if it was right, the obstacles would simply disappear. And now, he asked, leaning slightly forward, what do you think now? Now I think true love is rarely easy. I think it's worth fighting for. I think life is made of hard choices, and sometimes we choose wrong, and that's okay, because it brings us to where we need to be. I paused, playing with my ring. Thomas was a good man. I loved him. We built a beautiful life together. But, in 35 years, James, there hasn't been a single September day when I didn't think of you. Ties. Saw his eyes fill with tears. He reached for my hand across the table, his touch hesitant, careful, as if I were made of something precious and fragile. September was always our month, he murmured, and it was true. We'd met in September. Our first kiss was in September. Our last conversation, the painful, polite one where we agreed it was best to go separate ways, had been on a grey September evening. Every year, when the leaves began to change, I felt a pang in my chest, a longing so deep it felt physical. Do you know? James continued, still holding my hand. 3 years ago, I almost looked for you. I was at a conference in Boston and thought you might be there. Picked up my phone 20 times. What month was it? September, I let out, a laugh that was half a sob. I was there. And James, 3 years ago in September, Thomas was still alive, but the doctors had just told us the cancer was advanced. I was falling apart. And in a moment of weakness, I looked you up online. I saw you were divorced. I thought about sending a message, just to remember that once, long ago, someone made me feel invincible. Why didn't you? Because it wouldn't have been fair. Not to Thomas. Not to me. And maybe not to you either. I was vulnerable, scared, clinging to memories of when we were young and everything was simple. I squeezed his hand. But now I wonder if it was something more, if it was timing, if it was the universe saying, not yet. Catherine, there are still lessons to learn, still life to live. James was quiet for a long moment, looking at our intertwined hands. When he spoke, his voice was thick. Melissa used to say I was married to a ghost. She was never cruel, but in our last conversations before the divorce, she said she always felt that part of me was somewhere else. I denied it, of course. Convinced myself I was fully present. But she was right. Part of me never left that Michigan campus. Never stopped holding your hand under that elm. That's not fair to the life you lived, I said gently. Your daughters, your work, the good things you built. No, you're right, and I don't regret my life. Kat, I learned to be a father, to build beautiful things, to find purpose. But it's possible to be grateful for the road we've traveled and still miss the one we didn't take. He ran his free hand through his gray hair. After the divorce, I started going to church. I wasn't raised religious, you remember, but I was searching. I don't know. For answers. Meaning. And one day the priest said that God gives us exactly what we need when we need it, not when we want it. About faith and divine timing. I found your faith, I said, feeling tenderness. I found something. Still figuring out what it is, but I found peace. Too, or I thought I had. He smiled a sad, beautiful smile. And then I walk into a hotel lobby in Denver and see you. And realize maybe the peace I found was just acceptance. Not the same thing. We talked until the lobby lights seemed brighter against the darkening world outside. He told me about the house he restored in an old Portland neighborhood. About how his daughters had introduced him to his grandson, a 3-year-old already showing signs of being as much a dreamer as his grandfather. I told him about my non-profit projects, about how Thomas and I never had children, but created a sort of family with the young people we helped, about how I still visited his grave every week, and talked to him about my day. He made you happy? James said, not as a question. He did. And I know Melissa made you happy too, in her own way. Then why does it feel like something was missing? I didn't answer right away. The truth was complex, layered, and I didn't want to simplify it. I think we can have several versions of true love in a lifetime. Thomas was my companion, my partner, my best friend. He was the love of my adult life. But you, James, you were the love of my youth, the first one. The one that defines all the others. And maybe that's how it had to be. Maybe we needed whole lives to be ready for what? For this moment. To look at each other with all these years, all these experiences, all these scars and still see that person beneath the elm. He was very quiet. Then he asked, so softly I almost didn't hear, what do we do now? Cat, Nat, was the question, wasn't it? There we were, two people who had carried each other in silence for decades, finally in the same place at the same time. But we weren't those students anymore. We had lives, homes on opposite coasts, stories that didn't include each other. How do you stitch back together something that's been undone for so long? I have to go back to Boston the day after tomorrow, I said, and every word hurt. There's a board meeting I can't miss. And I have a client in Portland counting on me for a presentation Monday. So, that's it. We meet after 35 years, spend a few hours together, and just move on. James shook his head slowly. I don't know if I can do that again, Kat. Let you go. Not this time. But what are you suggesting? We're 60, James. Our lives are set. I have responsibilities. You have your daughters, your grandchildren. No, I know all that. He stood abruptly, walked to the window, watching Denver's lights spread into the darkness. When he turned back, there was determination on his face. But let me ask you something. When Thomas was sick, in his final days, did you have any regrets? Anything you wished you'd done differently? I thought carefully before answering. I wished we'd traveled more. I wished I'd said I love you more often. I wished I'd been braver about living fully, instead of always planning for some perfect future that never came.
Jack Bradley.
And look, I'm not saying we should get married tomorrow, or that one of us should give everything up right away. But I'm saying this time, let's be brave. Let's find a way. Let's try. My heart was pounding. How we can start slow. Talk every day. Monthly visits, one of us goes to the other. See if what we feel still exists when we're not surrounded by the nostalgia of a hotel lobby. He sat back down, taking both my hands now. And if 6 months from now it still makes sense, we talk about something more permanent. Maybe I move to Boston. Maybe you come to Portland. Maybe we find somewhere new, just ours. And if it doesn't work, if we find out we were just two people in love with the memory of each other, then at least we'll know. We won't spend the rest of our lives wondering. He leaned his forehead against mine. I've spent 35 years wondering. Cat, I don't want to die still wondering. There, in that moment, with James's face so close I could count the tiny lines around his eyes, I felt something open in my chest. It was as if I were breathing fully for the first time in decades. It wasn't the feverish love of youth, that wild, reckless feeling. It was something deeper, calmer, but infinitely more powerful. It was the love of someone who has lived, lost, learned and still chooses to believe. All right, I whispered. Let's try. Let's be brave this time. Kissed me then. Gentle and careful, and it felt like coming home. When we pulled apart, we were both crying but smiling too. We spent the rest of the conference together, sitting side by side in lectures, eating lunch at small restaurants we discovered, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. On my last day, he took me to a nearby park where there was a giant elm knot, unlike the one on the Michigan campus. You know, he said as we stood beneath its branches. I once read that elms can live for hundreds of years. They keep growing, changing, but their roots remain. They connect with other elms underground, forming an invisible network. We're like the elms, I said, understanding. We've always been connected. Cat, it just took time to find our way back. When we finally said goodbye at the airport, it wasn't with the desperate sadness of youth, but with the patient hope of maturity. We had a plan. We had intention. We had, at last, the courage to try. On the plane back to Boston, I looked out the window at the clouds below and thought about all the Septembers of my life, all the times I'd felt that familiar pang of longing. I thought of Thomas and felt only gratitude for the time we'd had. I thought of James's daughters, whom I'd soon meet. I thought of the life still ahead, of the stories yet to be written, and I thought that maybe it's never too late. That true love has no expiration date. That sometimes life takes us down long, winding roads, simply because we need those experiences to be ready for what was always ours. That faith isn't believing things will be easy, it's trusting that, in the end, everything fits exactly as it should. 3 months later, James came to Boston. 6 months later, I started looking for work in Portland. A year later, we married in a small ceremony beneath an elm, with our blended families around us, in a golden September that brought not longing but completeness. And when people ask if I regret all those lost years, I tell them the truth. They weren't lost, they were necessary. They were the journey we needed to take to arrive here, two hearts that never really parted, just took the long way home to each other.